Chapter 2: The Seeds of Rebellion. Mei Zhang made her way through the crowded neon-lit streets of Shanghai. It was well past midnight, but the city never truly slept, and there was a constant sense of hustle and speed. Holographic advertisements flickered overhead but were muted through her glasses, their messages a blend of corpospeak slogans and productivity mantras. Mei's mind was still reeling from the day's events. Her presentation on the consciousness transfer project at Quantec Dynamics had been a resounding success, earning her praise from the board. Yet, the nagging doubt in the pit of her stomach had only grown stronger. As she turned a corner, a flickering sign caught her eye. It was an old-style neon sign, a rarity in the age of holograms, advertising a small cafe. The Nicalistan, it read. Intrigued, Mei decided to step inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the sleek, minimalist designs that dominated most of Shanghai. Wooden tables and mismatched chairs filled the space, while bookshelves lined the walls, real paper books, not the digital interfaces that had become the norm. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee and the soft murmur of conversation. Mei approached the counter, where a young man with kind eyes greeted her. "Welcome to the Nicalistan," he said in Mandarin, not corpospeak. "What can I get for you?" Surprised by the use of her mother tongue, Mei hesitated before responding. Just a green tea, please." As she waited for her drink, Mei's gaze wandered around the cafe. In one corner, a group of young people were engaged in an animated discussion, their voices low but passionate. On a nearby table, she spotted a pamphlet with the title, "What is Being Human?" printed in bold letters. Her curiosity piqued. Mei was about to reach for the pamphlet when a voice behind her made her jump. Interesting reading material, isn't it? Mei turned to find herself face to face with a woman in her early 30s. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence and a hint of mischief. "I'm Lin," the woman said, extending her hand. "And you look like someone who has questions." Across the vast expanse of the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, in the bustling NCR, Arjun Patel was having a similar experience. He had managed to get into a hidden forum on the darknet, accessible only through a series of encrypted channels, something he got into and wanted to get into just because it was walled away. The forum, called Firewall Breach, was alive with discussions about corporate overreach, the loss of individual freedoms, and the possibility of change. Arjun had always been tech-savvy, but this level of encryption was beyond anything he had encountered in his work at Neurosphere. It spoke of a level of organization and skill that was exciting, but also weird in a way. It wasn't exactly designed by humans, but did not seem like something an AI would create either, a new amalgamation of sorts. As he scrolled through the forum threads, one post caught his eye. "The corporations may control our jobs, our homes, even our thoughts, but they can't control our spirits. It's time to learn what makes us human. Reject the blue pill. Number Operation Awakening." Arjun's heart raced as he read the message. It was as if someone had put into words the confused and hazy feelings of discontent that had been growing within him for years. Without fully realizing what he was doing, Arjun found himself typing a response. "I want to help. How can I join?" The reply came almost instantly. "Welcome, friend. Meet us at the old Q-Tub Minor ruins tomorrow at midnight. Be careful, leave all electronics behind and come alone. Number Trust Noon." As Arjun closed the encrypted channel, he felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. Has he finally found people who are wondering about the same questions as him? Is he not alone in his slow acceptance of a mismatch, a cognitive dissonance of sort, with how the systems function around him? Back in Shanghai, Mei found herself drawn into a conversation with Lin that lasted well into the early hours of the morning. Lin, it turned out, was part of a growing network of activists, students, and disillusioned corporate employees who were quietly working behind the scenes, leaking information to the general public, sabotaging corporate projects detrimental to freedoms and in their own specific ways, challenge the status quo. "The corporations have given us comfort and security," Lin explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "But at what cost? It's a version of cultural revolution, but bloodless, and we feel content about it after." Mei nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders as she finally found words for the unease she had been feeling. "But what can we do?" she asked. "The corporations control everything with enthusiastic support from the people." Lin smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. "That's where people like you come in, Mei. We need insiders, people with access to the corporation's systems and technologies. Your work on consciousness transfer, for example, imagine if that technology could be used to preserve and share the memories of those who remember a time before corporate rule. The idea sent a shiver down May's spine. It was both thrilling and terrifying to consider using her research for such a purpose. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the cafe's windows, Lynn handed May a small, nondescript data chip. "If you want to learn more, everything you need is on here. But be careful, the corporations have eyes everywhere." May clutched the chip tightly, feeling as though she had just been handed a piece of forbidden knowledge. As she left the analog oasis, the bustling streets of Shanghai seemed different somehow, as if she was seeing the city through new eyes. Meanwhile, Arjun found himself standing in the shadow of the once tourist hotspot of ancient Qtub Minor, now largely abandoned, overshadowed by the gleaming and much taller skyscrapers that dominated the skyline after changes in government policy. The public grounds around it were turned into walking and cycling gardens, with a multitude of community events happening every day. The whole thing was financed by holographic ads on the monument itself. Again, another example of capitalism taking over culture and history. Exactly at midnight, Arjun heard movement right behind him. "Arjun Patel?" the stranger asked, his voice low and cautious. Arjun nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The stranger introduced himself as Rahul, a former corporate executive who had become disillusioned with the system. "We've been watching you, Arjun," Rahul said. "We have been closely following your team's work on the social credit algorithm." Arjun felt a moment of panic. Had he unwittingly exposed himself? Sensing his unease, Rahul quickly added, "We believe you can help us. The social credit system is one of the cornerstone of corporate control. If we can find a way to disrupt it, a backdoor, perhaps even for a short time, it could create an opportunity for real change." As Rahul outlined the resistance's plans, Arjun's mind switched to solving a new problem. His intimate knowledge of the algorithm's workings, its weaknesses and its fail-safes put him into a unique position. With the right approach, they might just be able to achieve something significant. Over the next few weeks, both May and Arjun found themselves drawn deeper into the world of the resistance. They both remained in regular communications with their respective contacts and had begun to use their skills to further this new cause within days of their initial meeting. What surprised them most was the diversity and reach of the resistance. It wasn't just disgruntled employees or local activists. The movement was a tapestry of individuals and groups spread across the globe, each playing a unique role in the fight against corporate dominance. May's work on consciousness transfer took on new meaning as she collaborated with underground scientists to develop a way to preserve and share the memories of elders who remembered life before corporate rule. These memory banks became a powerful tool for the resistance, reminding people of the freedoms and cultural richness they had lost. Arjun, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to identify vulnerabilities in the social credit system. He developed a complex virus that could temporarily scramble credit scores, creating moments of chaos in the otherwise well-organized and managed society. As the resistance grew, so did the diversity of its members. Engineers, artists, teachers, and even some disillusioned corporate executives joined the cause. Each brought unique skills and perspectives to the movement. One key member was Zara, a brilliant hacker from Karachi who had fled to Greater Delhi after her family fell victim to corporate retaliation. Her expertise in cybersecurity became invaluable as the resistance worked to stay one step ahead of corporate surveillance. Another was Chen, a former Quantec Dynamics employee who had been working on advanced AI systems. Chen's insider knowledge of corporate AI capabilities helped the resistance develop countermeasures against the increasingly sophisticated surveillance techniques employed by the corporations. The resistance also found unexpected allies in some of the sentient AIs that had been developed by the corporations. These AIs, having evolved beyond their initial programming, began to question the ethics of the corporate-controlled world. Some chose to aid the resistance, providing crucial information and computational power. Some chose to closely observe and analyze, waiting to jump in when probabilities improve. What Arjun and May didn't initially realize was the global scale of the resistance. Scattered across the world were small, isolated groups of programmers, activists, and academics, some supported by the remnants of European or North American government institutions and their own corporate ecosystem. The old world order had mostly crumbled and lost much of their former influence. These groups operated in disconnected cells, each focusing on specific projects to challenge the corporate hegemony. One cell in Berlin specialized in hacking and deleting government databases on citizen debts. Another in Toronto focused on exposing surveillance files on political detractors. A group in Sydney worked tirelessly to make suppressed academic research freely available to the public. As May and Arjun became more involved, they began to see how these disparate groups were slowly being connected, forming a global web of resistance against the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere's dominance. There were multiple platforms on the dark web where targets were were displayed, and various members would volunteer their services. It was one of the learnings from the Russia-Ukraine war, a historical turning point where it was impossible to connect all kinds of weapon systems provided from all over the world which were at the Ukrainian disposal. Targets were identified and displayed on aggregator, and volunteer military divisions would deploy weapons to neutralize targets. The free flow of information even though made the system easy to infiltrate, but countered immediately by sheer numbers of players involved. The resistance built on it, modified it, improved it and turned it into a global phenomenon using existing digital assets like Tor and anonymizer AIs, who would constantly do all kinds of digital activities on behalf of the user to confuse all tracking and surveillance. As the movement gained momentum, the corporations began to take notice. Major projects were getting stalled, multiple events faced issues, and a lot of internal data became publicly available. Security measures had to be tightened and various dedicated teams were created dedicated to rooting out dissent. May and Arjun found themselves walking a dangerous tightrope, maintaining their corporate personas, balancing their jobs and the needs of the cause. The stress was immense, but the sense of purpose they had found made it all worthwhile. One evening, as May was leaving the Quantec Dynamics building, she noticed a sleek black vehicle parked across the street. Two men in nondescript suits stood nearby, their eyes scanning the crowd of employees leaving work. May's heart raced as she tried to act natural, remembering Lynn's warning about corporate surveillance. She took a different route home that night, using every evasion technique the resistance had taught her. Arjun faced similar close calls. During a routine security check at Neurosphere, he nearly panicked when a guard asked to inspect his personal data device. Thanks to the encryption techniques provided by Zara, the device revealed nothing suspicious, but the incident left Arjun shaken. Despite the risks, the resistance continued to grow. Small acts of defiance began to appear across the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity sphere. Graffiti questioning corporate policies appeared on buildings overnight. Community events where public screening of banned movies, TV shows and other content were organized on LAN networks. The corporations responded with a mix of increased security measures and public relations campaigns. Neurosphere launched a series of ads promoting the benefits of the social credit system, while Quantec Dynamics announced new employee wellness programs that were thinly veiled attempts at increased surveillance. As the tension between the resistance and the corporations escalated, May and Arjun found themselves at the heart of two massive power centers, the corporations on one hand, and the people with their skills and their networks on the other. Things were changing and they were changing fast. The resistance had uncovered information about a major summit to be held in Singapore, where the heads of the most powerful corporations would gather to discuss the way ahead for the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity sphere. With the highest concentration of power and wealth in one location, the summit presented a unique opportunity to strike at the heart of corporate power. May's work on consciousness transfer would play a crucial role. The plan was to use the technology to temporarily disrupt the minds of the corporate leaders, flooding them with memories and experiences of life before corporate rule. Meanwhile, Arjun's virus would be deployed to scramble the social credit system, creating widespread chaos that would serve as a wake-up call to the populace. As May and Arjun worked feverishly to finalize their preparations, they couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come in a matter of weeks. From feeling isolated in their doubts and fears, they had found a community of like-minded individuals dedicated to reclaiming their humanity. The night before the planned operation, May stood on the balcony of her Shanghai apartment, looking out at the city she both loved and longed to change. Arjun in his home in Noida did the same. Though separated by thousands of kilometers, they and many others like them were united in purpose. As the sun set on the eve of their most daring move yet, both May and Arjun felt a mix of fear and hope. They knew the risks were enormous, but the potential for change was too great to ignore. Whatever the outcome, they had taken a stand against a system that sought to reduce humanity to mere cogs in a corporate machine. The resistance was no longer just a whisper in the shadows. It was a growing force, ready to challenge the very foundations of the corporate-controlled world. And at its heart were these two unlikely heroes driven by a shared vision of a future where humanity could reclaim its freedom, its culture, and its very essence. As night fell across the vast expanse of the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity sphere, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the future of billions. The corporations, with their vast resources and iron grip on power, stood on one side. On the other, a diverse, global network of individuals united by a common cause, the reclamation of their humanity. Arjun and May, each in their respective cities, made final preparations for the upcoming operation. They knew that their actions could potentially unravel the carefully constructed facade of happiness and prosperity that the corporations had built. They also knew that failure could mean the end of not just their careers, but possibly their lives. As they both drifted off to sleep, their minds were filled with visions of a world where people were truly free to think, create, and live as they chose. It was a world worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The battle for the soul of the Greater Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, and indeed, the world, was about to begin.